People always remember their first time doing things. Your first kiss, your first car, your first day at kindergarten. But what about the last time? Specifically,
I was actually just out of kindergarten recently. I'm kidding.
Specifically, the last time you watch one of your favorite fighters fight. Because today we are talking about Dustin Poirier's last fight in the UFC and who he should face in his last fight. We got a list of some tougher fights, some easier fights, and maybe some Hail Marys to toss in there.
This dude is, his storylines that he comes up with, I mean, it's actually incredible how he thinks of these awful ideas.
It's called autism. It's called autism.
Get him in the fighting nerds. All right, so yeah, let's talk about the tough fights first. And Dustin Poirier has so many options because he's had history with a lot of fighters.
Yeah.
But there's also some new up-and-comers in the division, which he hasn't fought yet.
But here's the thing, is like, it's so tough because it's like, do you want Dustin Poirier to go out on his back? Or do you want to see him go out either standing over top his opponent or with his arm raised?
But he looked good in his Makhachev fight. So
did.
I don't think he's really that far out of his prime. In fact, that was his best title performance in my opinion. Against the number one pound-for-pound fighter. Put up a great fight, won a couple rounds off of him.
With no hips.
Yeah, with no hips. With no hips. Charles Oliveira is the first fight I want to talk about. How do you think that fight plays out, and how realistic do you think that fight is?
I just don't see this one happening.
Yeah, it's one that doesn't get talked about at all.
Because I think it's just the whole idea of like the styles. We don't want to see Dustin Poirier on his back or Charles on his back, and guard, and it's just like obviously this fight would be awesome.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't feel right for a Dustin Poirier last fight. And I think that Charles has other things to do.
Yeah, it's not like this really does that much for Charles's career.
Yeah.
He's close to the belt, one win away pretty much from getting another title shot. And if he beats Dustin, it's like, okay, well, Dustin is on his way out.
Yeah.
So, and for Dustin, yeah, there's a good chance that he loses this fight, gets submitted again in another fight. And it feels like their storyline's kind of over.
Yeah.
So I haven't even really considered the Charles Oliveira fight. Obviously, it's a big money fight. Like it could co-main an MSG. It could main event a bad pay-per-view,
Yeah.
Like it's a huge fight. It just doesn't really feel realistic though.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel right. We're talking about Dustin Poirier's last fight. It's just not it.
Yeah.
Moving on. Next guy I want to talk about is maybe the most realistic. It's the name that you hear tossed out the most. It's Max Holloway.
Yeah.
I think one of the big sources I think it was yesterday, came out and said that this is probably the fight that the UFC is leaning towards.
Really?
And yeah. I think it might be my second favorite fight.
Yeah.
That they can make.
I think this is a great fight, and the reason being is because they fought each other, but it was so early on that it doesn't really represent who they are.
Yeah,
as fighters.
Dustin Poirier got the win like 10 years ago.
Submission win too.
And it's like that's not that they both went on crazy different runs. They went on their respective paths from there. Obviously, Max becoming champion, Dustin not.
Yeah.
Burn. Sorry, Dustin, I love you.
Technically, he was an interim champ. The comments are gonna say
Dustin Poirier literally was champion. Okay, interim champions are real champions. No, they're not. Shut up. Next, but Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier, like this is guaranteed to be a banger.
Oh
and,
yeah.
And I think you probably a little bit less have to worry about maybe Dustin Poirier going out on his back.
Yeah, I think this is a very even fight.
Yeah.
Max Holloway showed that he looks great at lightweight, has more power in lightweight, but still has that range and that volume and that cardio. And Dustin Poirier has only been fighting in 5-round fights for a long time.
Yeah.
He usually goes quite a long distance as well. So I think this is one of the most exciting fights you could put on in the UFC now.
This is literally like Batman versus Superman or Captain America versus Iron Man.
Yeah.
It's like the two superheroes, the two heroes, the two guys that no one hates.
Yeah.
Can do no wrong.
And I don't know who I would pick in this,
It's Dustin's last fight. Surely we're both predicting Dustin.
But Holloway is... I don't know. He's different.
Holloway's one of my guys, but I'd have to pick Dustin. This is such a tough. It's so close.
Yeah, I think I would pick Dustin just because of just the power at lightweight. I don't know, man. It's close.
And
though.
Max coming off that KO, you never know what happens.
Yeah, the chin could be a little bit rough now.
Yeah, you never know. We'll have to see how a post to Poirier chin looks on Volk. Versus,
Post to Poirier chin.
Like, if Lopez puts out Volk with one uppercut, Max Holloway retire. Don't ever
Save yourself.
Don't ever,
Stick to CSGO.
something else. All right, next matchup, the guy that just beat Rafael Fiziev, Justin Gaethje.
Yeah, I don't think it's that realistic.
No.
They both really like each other. They both talked about Justin Gaethje's talked a lot about how he won't take that fight.
Yeah.
They're 1-1. He feels like their story's over, which is kind of like the opposite of it being over. It's
1-1 tied, but we're done. We're ending on the tie.
Yeah, but I just think they don't want to go through that again. They're both guys who, when they step in the octagon, they're accepting a large amount of damage.
Yeah, and they realize what it takes and what you have to do to your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So to go and do it to someone, they probably consider each other friends at this point.
Yeah, imagine me and you going in the octagon.
Yeah, and imagine
I'd love that.
Imagine you're Justin Gaethje going and fighting Dustin Poirier in his last fight. Probably his family there. If you're Justin Gaethje, are you actively trying to go and knock this guy out?
Yeah.
So it's like he would be compromised in this fight, and it would. Next thing you know, it's Volkov versus Pavlovich.
Don't bring up that.
They
name.
know each other's game plans.
Don't bring up that. Name.
So I wouldn't be looking forward to it. Like, obviously, I'm looking forward to it if it happens, but
it's not my.
There's
number
other
one
options.
Pick. Yeah, I feel like if they made this fight, they fumble.
Yeah.
My
number one pick is Dan Hooker.
Really?
Versus Dustin Poirier.
Really? Wow.
I just think that you have a war on your hands, and I think you have, out of the guys in this, like, we have a tough fight category, I think you have the best chance for Mr. Poirier to go out on top here.
In this fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Dan Hooker is probably the weakest opponent.
But it's not like you get a discredited win. It's like you still beat Dan Hooker, a war in your last fight, Mm-hmm. It's everything you want with potentially the weakest opponent.
Yeah, and I think with Dan Hooker pulling out of his fight against Gaethje, they're still going to give him an opponent who's ranked higher than him probably.
Yeah.
And Dustin Poirier is very much a Justin Gaethje part.
Yeah.
They're similar.
It's the same thing.
1A, 1B.
Yeah.
Big names, both very old. And if Hooker gets a win over them, he's really close to that title shot, maybe even gets a title shot. And then if Dustin Poirier wins, which is a very good shot that he does, then it's a great fight anyways. And he retires on top.
Yeah.
So,
I think that this would be, it may not have the name value, for his last fight, but you throw this to the co-main event on any card.
My number one, though, would be Ilia Topuria.
Okay.
It would be such a great fight. The boxing would be absolutely next level. The only problem is Ilia Topuria has a good shot at KOing him.
I can't see him do it to another one.
I know. That's like 3 of the most fan favorite fighters.
Dude, he's just collecting infinity stones with your favorite fighters.
Yeah. But you can't deny it. The boxing in this fight, everyone would be watching. I think the buildup would be really good. Dustin's a petty guy, and I think Topuria could get under his skin quite a lot by just brushing him aside. Yeah, this would be a great buildup, a great fight. And also a fight where I don't think it's as clear-cut as it seems, Everyone would be, Topuria already KO'd Max, already KO'd Volk. Of course, he's going to beat Dustin. But we're saying the same thing about Dustin and Makhachev. And Dustin put up a way better performance than anyone expected. And I think we'd see a similar thing. I don't think it'd be easy for Ilia Topuria, especially with the height and the range disadvantage, closing the distance with a guy who punches as hard as that and he has good technique. He always has his hands up. It would be a tough fight for Ilia Topuria. I would still pick him, but it's not clear. It's not easy.
But it's also, there's a lot of risk because, if it's as clear, as close as you say it is, having Dustin Poirier take away your O of one of your next up-and-comers in his last fight, it's like, oh.
It would suck.
It'd be like, oh.
Yeah, but I think it's close, but also Ilia could catch him.
Yeah.
Who hasn't Ilia caught?
Yeah,
right. He's just different.
And then the last kind of fighter in this tough fighter, a tough matchup category, Arman Sarukian.
I think this is his worst matchup.
Yeah, I don't want to see this.
This would be really hard for him, and you don't want to see this in terms of styles for his last fight.
Yeah.
You don't want to watch this.
Yeah, if they book this, I don't like you.
No. I think Arman will probably he could get a Dan Hooker maybe.
Yeah.
You know, if he wants to get back into that title contention. Easier fights, though. There's a couple of guys on the way up who maybe Dustin wants to give a shot. Maybe he wants something a little bit easier, not against a legend. But some of these guys are legends, you know? We have Colby Covington.
Yeah, I know that, like, people are like, oh, Colby Covington, he's a welterweight, you know? But, like, there's always kind of been, like, the talk about maybe this fight would happen one day.
Yeah.
You know? And, like, you probably don't have stylistically what you want in this last fight, but, like, I don't know why, but, like, it just feels like, you know, this could happen. You know, if they're really scrambling for something for Dustin, you give him Colby Covington.
And Covington, it would take that fight because he doesn't deserve anything anymore.
No.
But this is a massive money fight for him.
Oh, yeah. And, like, you have Colby versus Dustin, two people with names.
Yeah.
And this is free for Dustin. This is free.
As long as he looks good at welterweight, you know. We haven't ever seen him at welterweight.
He got into the 5th round with Islam Makhachev. You have Colby, who's a small welterweight. Like, he might be the smallest welterweight.
Yeah, he's not. I think they actually might be the same height.
Yeah.
I think they're both about 5'10", 5'11".
Yeah. So, Colby versus Dustin, America versus America.
It'd be fun. It'd be fun.
Good America versus bad America.
And I don't think there's a lot of chance for Dustin to get knocked out.
Yeah, you're not seeing him going on his back.
Exactly. Now, there's also a couple more fights. There's Moicano, which I don't think that's not a legend fight. Moicano's not a big enough name. Same with Fiziev, especially now that Fiziev lost to Gaethje. There's no way that Fiziev gets another shot up in the rankings, especially as high as Dustin is.
Those would be like last minute scrambling matches. They want Dustin to have the best chance for him to win. A fight that could be exciting. Don't see it.
Dustin wants a legend, and he'll get it.
You know,
it's his last fight.
We've already talked about, or you know, we hear this talk about, oh, Paddy Pimblett, and Dustin has shot that down.
Yeah,
you know, but we see Chandler and Paddy are fighting at 314. Michael Chandler gets the win over Paddy. Do we see Chandler versus Dustin Poirier again?
I don't think so. I don't think Dustin likes Chandler. He doesn't want to give Chandler the opportunity to beat him in his last. Can you imagine, bro? Can you imagine that Chandler beats Dustin Poirier? Dustin Poirier might commit some bad things, you know?
Chandler can't. Surely not.
Well, he could, though.
He could, obviously.
He could. Round one. Round one Chandler. It's a dangerous man. You don't want to be in his way.
All right. Can I move on to my Hail Marys and talk about them a little bit?
I'm not going to say anything, so you can do all the talking you want.
First Hail Mary. He still got that UFC contract, you know, that everyone loves to talk about. Imagine the UFC brought back Conor for another Dustin Poirier fight. You could send Conor out of the UFC on his back, knocked out, probably foaming at the mouth.
Your wife is in me DMs.
You know, you end the Conor McGregor saga while having Dustin Poirier have his ride into the sunset.
This would be their 4th fight, bro.
Yeah, so
their 4th.
Moreno.
They're Moreno piggy maxing. This is an awful fight.
All right, my next one. We talk about how Dustin Poirier wants to go out against a legend. All right. But what if the UFC suddenly came into a lot of money? You know, they made some money and they were like, you know, we're going to go and sign a guy from another promotion. They bring in Paul Hughes to the UFC, a new lightweight, and they're like, you know what? Like, we want to immediately do something big with Paul Hughes here. Let's have Paul Hughes be Dustin Poirier's retirement fight. So you basically Conor McGregor light. And if he can't get Paul Hughes, go to Gary.
Sugar-free Conor McGregor. Yeah. No, I mean those are genuinely terrible takes, but you know, maybe the comments have other ideas that we didn't mention.
But if you could pick one matchup, what are you picking?
I think Max Holloway. I think that's the fight that's most realistic as well as exciting. You know, I think Topuria would be the best fight, but I think Topuria has bigger things in store. Yeah. So I don't want to waste the time and potential.
I think at this point, I think that the Hooker injury lines up well timeline wise.
True.
So I think it's almost down to Hooker Holloway. You know.
Yeah, but can you rely on Hooker again to stay? Like, he's had a lot of injuries, bro. Yeah. It's really sad.
And you'd hate to see Poirier's retirement fight last minute.
Dominic Cruz style.
You are actually calling in Paul Hughes.
Yeah.
You know.
Or who was it? Was it Weidman again who got his fight canceled? Like, there's been so many legends who have had their last fights canceled.
Yeah, Dominic
Cruz.
Yeah, I'm actually just going to retire now. I'm sick of this.
Yeah. All right.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Go down to the comments. Let us know who you want to fight Dustin Poirier in his last fight. While you guys are down there, make sure to like and subscribe. And we appreciate all the love and support. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
See ya.